controversy.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
President Trump heading to the Middle East today. That's as a U.S. brokered peace deal between Israel and Hamas takes shape. He plans to greet Israeli hostages after they're released Monday morning, addressing the Israeli government and lead a peace summit in Egypt. He will be coming back Tuesday for a White House ceremony honoring the late Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated last month.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be there because I'll be going to, I'll go to Cairo. I think that's where we're going, as opposed to the place of the signing. And we have a lot of leaders from all over the world coming too. They've been invited. And then I'm coming back, I believe it's Tuesday night, for Charlie Kirk, a friend of mine, a friend of all of ours, a friend of a lot of the people right here. And we're giving him the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
And with the government shutdown now in its 12th day, President Trump announced on Truth Social that he is directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to, quote, use all available funds to get our troops paid on October 15th. Trump did not identify the source for funding. A Pentagon official said about $8 billion slated for research and development would be used to pay troops if the shutdown continues after Wednesday. Trump urged Democrats to open the government, saying he will not allow them to, quote, hold our military.
Forcing the authorities to negotiate. In order to force Kodak, the major employer in Rochester, New York, to increase the ratio of black employees to white, Alinsky came up with a similar tactic, seizing on an important cultural tradition in the city. An upcoming performance of the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, Alinsky planned to purchase hundreds of tickets for his activists and feed them baked beans beforehand, so they could fill the theater and ruin the performance with flatulence. This episode didn't come to fruition, but the threat of it, as well as Alinsky's other tactics, enhanced his position in negotiations. Alinsky's book leaves the impression of a sinister, cold, and calculating individual. His use of community organizing was really a form of gradual revolution. The differences between Alinsky and his forerunners were several. First, both old and new leftists were at least idealistic in their rhetoric, while Alinsky stripped revolution of its idealistic veneer and exposed it as a naked power struggle. When he conducted training for community organizations, he would routinely ask the trainees, why organize? Some would say that it was to help others, but Alinsky would roar back, you want to organize for power. In the training manual that Alinsky followers went by, it said, quote, we are not virtuous by not wanting power. We are really cowards for not wanting power. And, quote, power is good. Powerlessness is evil. Second, Alinsky didn't think much of the rebellious youth of the 60s who were publicly against government and society. He stressed that whenever possible, one should enter the system while biding time for opportunities to subvert it from within. Third, Alinsky's ultimate goal was to subvert and destroy, not to benefit any group. Thus, in implementing his plan, it was necessary to conceal the real purpose with localized or staged goals that were seemingly reasonable or harmless by themselves, to mobilize large crowds to action. When people were accustomed to being mobilized, it was relatively easy to mobilize them to act toward more radical goals. In Rules for Radicals, Alinsky said, any revolutionary change must be preceded by a passive, affirmative, non-challenging attitude toward change among the mass of our people. Remember, once you organize people around something that's commonly agreed upon as pollution, then an organized people is on the move. From there, it's a short and natural step to political pollution, to Pentagon pollution. A leader from Students for a Democratic Society, who was deeply influenced by Alinsky, nailed the essence of radicalizing protests. Quote, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. The radical left after the 60s was deeply influenced by Alinsky and always turned the response to any social issue into dissatisfaction with the status quo overall as a stepping stone for advancing the revolutionary cause. Fourth, Alinsky turned politics into a guerrilla war without restraint. In explaining his strategy for community organizing, Alinsky told his followers eyes, ears, and nose. As he writes in Rules for Radicals, quote, "First the eyes. If you have organized a vast, mass-based people's organization, you can parade it visibly before the enemy and openly show your power. Second, the ears. If your organization is small in numbers, then do what Gideon did. Conceal the members in the dark, but raise a din and clamor that will make the listener believe that your organization numbers many more than it does. Third, the nose. If your organization is too tiny even for noise, stink up the place. Fifth, from his actions in politics, Alinsky emphasized using the most evil aspects of human nature, including laziness, greed, envy, and hatred. Sometimes participants in his campaigns would win petty gains, but this only made them more cynical and shameless. In order to subvert the political system and social order of free countries, Alinsky was happy to lead his followers to moral bankruptcy. From this, it can be inferred that if he were to truly gain power, he would neither take care of nor pity his former comrades. Decades later, two prominent figures in American politics who were deeply influenced by Alinsky helped to usher in the silent revolution that has subverted American civilization, traditions, and values. At the same time, the no-holds-barred, unrestricted guerrilla warfare type protests advocated by Alinsky became popular in America from the 1970s on. This is clear through the, quote, vomit in protest in 1999 against the World Trade Organization in Seattle, where protesters ingested a drug that induced vomiting, then collectively vomited in the plaza and conference center. The Occupy Wall Street movement, the Antifa movement, and so on. It's important to note that in one of the introductory pages for Rules for Radicals, Alinsky gave his, quote, acknowledgement to the very first radical, Lucifer. Further, in an interview with Playboy magazine shortly before his death, Alinsky said that when he died, he would, quote, unreservedly choose to go to hell and begin to organize the proletariat there because, quote, they're my kind of people.
Now, Jeff, it's good to see you. Tell us more about your view on the NFL's pick for 2026 halftime star.
Well, it's just so disturbing. I mean, the NFL is the most successful sports franchise in the world. They are able to pay high salaries to their players, to their executives, because fans dole out a lot of money for these games, and businesses pay a lot of money for these suites and these sponsorships, and these players get very wealthy. But it seems like the NFL turns its back on the fans, just as the poll you cited. People don't want the NFL to be involved in politics. They want a diversion from politics. They want to be able to enjoy Sunday without being reminded of the politics. And, you know, it really started, Chris, back in 2016 when you had the controversy about Colin Kaepernick, and it's really been going ever since. And I think it's unfortunate. It's really an insult to the fans that don't want it. Now, I'm not talking about liberals or conservatives, Democrats or Republicans. I'm just talking about they just don't want the politics, but they keep doing it with their actions and their choices for entertainment.
Now, the politicization of
It was Antonio Gramsci, a prominent Italian communist, who promoted the idea of carrying out, quote, the long march through the institutions. He found that it's difficult to incite people with faith to initiate a revolution to overthrow a legitimate government. And so in order to bring about a revolution, communists rely on a large number of foot soldiers who share their dark vision of morality, faith, and traditions. The revolution of the proletariat, then, must begin with the subversion of religion, morality, and civilization. After the failure of the street revolutions in the 1960s, the rebels began entering academia. They obtained degrees, became scholars, professors, government officials, and journalists, and entered the mainstream of society to carry out the long march through the institutions. Thus, they infiltrated and corrupted the institutions that are crucial for the maintenance of the morality of Western society. This includes the church, the government, the education system, the legislative and judicial bodies, the art world, the media, and NGOs. The United States, since the 1960s, has been like a patient with an affliction who cannot identify the cause. Para-Marxist ideas have seeped deep into American society and have been metastasizing. Among the many revolutionary theories and strategies that have been put forward, the Cloward-Piven strategy, proposed by two sociologists from Columbia University, became among the most well-known, and it has been tested with some degree of success. The core concept of the strategy is to use the public welfare system to force the government to collapse. According to U.S. government policy, the number of people eligible for welfare benefits is far greater than the number of people actually receiving benefits. As long as these people are encouraged or organized to take benefits, they will soon use up the government's funds, ensuring that the government will be unable to make ends meet. The National Welfare Rights Organization is behind the implementation of this strategy. According to statistics, from 1965 to 1974, the number of single-parent families receiving benefits surged from 4.3 million to 10.8 million, more than doubling. In 1970, 28% of the annual budget of New York City was spent on welfare expenses. On average, of every two people who worked, one person received benefits. From 1960 to 1970, the number of people receiving benefits in New York City rose from 200,000 to 1.1 million. In 1975, New York City was almost bankrupt. The Cloward-Piven strategy is intended to create a crisis. It thus can be regarded as another implementation of Alinsky's theories, one of which is to, quote, make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. Since the Bolshevik Revolution led by Lenin, the Communist Party has been good at intrigue and scheming. With a very small number of people, it created powerful revolutions and crises that could then be taken advantage of. Similar things happen in American politics. For example, some of the left's ideas in the United States are so radical that they seem incomprehensible to most people. Why, for instance, do lawmakers and elected officials seem to represent only the voice of extreme minorities, such as transgender people, but ignore the important issues of livelihood of the majority? The answer is simple. They are not representing the real public opinion. Lenin once said that labor unions are, quote, the transmission belts from the Communist Party to the masses. The communists found that as long as they control the labor unions, they control a large number of votes. As long as they control the votes, they can make elected officials and lawmakers do their bidding. Therefore, communists seek to gain control of labor unions, thereby controlling a large number of parliamentarians and elected officials to turn the communists' subversive political program into that of left-wing politics. W. Cleon Skousen wrote in his book, The Naked Communist, that one of the communists' 45 goals is to, quote, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Communists and those who ignorantly act on their behalf try to subvert the political and social system of free societies in any way they can. After decades of communist planning and operations, the governments and societies of the United States and other Western countries have been severely eroded as communist thinking and elements have entered the U.S. body politic. Eight, political correctness, the devil's thought police. Communist countries practice strict control over speech and thought. However, since the 1980s, another form of speech and thought control has appeared in the West. Thought police use the banner of, quote, political correctness to run amok in the media, society, and education system, using slogans and mass criticism to restrain speech and thought. Even though many have already felt the evil power of this control, they have not grasped its ideological origins. Phrases such as political correctness, together with progress, and solidarity have long been used by communist parties. Their superficial meaning is to avoid using language that is discriminatory towards minorities, women, the disabled, and others. For example, black people are to be called African Americans. American Indians are to be called Native Americans. Illegal immigrants are to be called undocumented workers, and so on. However, the hidden implication behind political correctness is to classify individuals into groups according to their victim status. Those who are the most oppressed should, therefore, be accorded the most respect and courtesy. This judgment, rendered solely on one's identity and disregarding individual conduct and talent, is the basis of what's called identity politics. This style of thinking is extremely popular in the United States and other Western countries. According to such logic, black lesbians, who are oppressed along vectors of race, sex, and sexual preference, are ranked at the forefront of victimhood. At the other extreme, white heterosexual males are considered the most privileged and, in the logic of victim politics, should be at the bottom of the totem pole. This type of classification is identical to what goes on in communist countries, where individuals were classified within the, quote, 5 classes of red or the, quote, 5 classes of black, according to their wealth and class status before the revolution. The Chinese Communist Party eliminated and oppressed landowners and capitalists because of their, quote, wrong class status, attacked intellectuals as the, quote, stinking old ninth, and chanted that, quote, the poor are the smartest, the nobles the dumbest. For complex historical reasons, including social and individual reasons, some groups have a lower political and socio-economic position, which cannot be simply explained as oppression. But political correctness draws an artificial boundary in people's minds. It sets up an extreme, you're either with us or against us code of morality, where subscribing to political correctness is considered to be moral, while those who dissent are accused of being racist, sexist, homophobic, anti-Islam, and so on. Universities, which should promote a culture of free expression, have become prisons for the mind. The world is silenced and unable to openly and sincerely grapple with a number of issues in politics, economics, and culture. In the name of political correctness, some organizations work to further push traditional religion out of the public sphere. Furthermore, some countries have expanded the definition of, quote, hate speech and implemented this expanded definition in law, thus using the law to force schools, media, and internet companies to conform. This is a step toward the same strictures on speech as found in communist states. After the 2016 U.S. presidential election, the United States became further divided. Protest marches erupted in major cities, and violations of freedom of speech occurred with greater frequency. In September 2017, an appearance by conservative author Ben Shapiro, who had been invited to speak at the University of California, Berkeley, was derailed due to Antifa's threats of violence. Berkeley police stood ready and dispatched 3 police helicopters. The security measures were estimated to have cost more than $600,000. A reporter asked a young student protester, "What about the First Amendment?" To which the student replied that it was no longer a relevant document. Ironically, one signature event that marked the start of the student movement in 1964 was a fight for freedom of speech at Berkeley. These days, the left uses the right to speech in its attempts to deprive others of having a legitimate outlet for their own voice. In March 2017, American social scientist Charles Murray was invited to speak at Middlebury College in Vermont. While there, he was physically assaulted, and an accompanying professor at the college was injured. In March 2018, tenured Professor Amy Wax of the University of Pennsylvania School of Law was relieved of some teaching duties after publishing a politically incorrect article. Other organizations, acting under the banner of opposing hate speech, have labeled regular conservative groups as hate groups. In addition, there have been cases of conservative authors and scholars being threatened about speaking at or attending various events. The intrusion on freedom of speech by the left is not part of normal debate between people with differing ideas. Instead, it's about the specter of communism, using people with ill intent, provoking them to obscure the truth and suppress righteous, or at least normal, voices. Political correctness, in essence, is about substituting deviant political and moral standards for righteous ones. It is the devil's thought police.
People remember where they were when they heard the news. It's that nature. And so, as far as what Hamas has done with those who are deceased, That's extremely disappointing, and my heart breaks for those families. Hamas is claiming they don't know where everybody is. That's sickening. Will they be used as bartering chips like they've done with others in the past? I expect so, because again, they have to maintain some kind of power unless somebody takes them out of that position of power.
Gabrielle, a single person dying in a terrorist attack is an absolute tragedy. But to bring in some numbers for context for our viewers here, the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel would be the equivalent of about 40 9/11s, considering the disparity in the population between the United States and Israel. Trump says the war is over. He's obviously saying that knowing that there is still more that needs to be done with phase 2 and so on. But what does that confidence that Trump says the war is over tell you?
Well, sometimes our president makes the deal before the deal is done. And it's that confidence that nobody wants to say anything pejorative. They want to move ahead. His optimism and his strength have been very pivotal in all of this happening. So it's my belief that people will line up around the theme of making this the last war in the region. That's what we all want. I know some pundits of prophecy think otherwise, but we're going to work to really make things thrive with our nation. Now, one of the things you're going to see come up, and I'll just say this final thing I can say, I suppose, you're going to hear the theme two-state solution come up again. And that's never been a solution because it was only an effort to get a temporary state, if you will, to get rid of the Jews. So there's really only one state. So the Hamas ambition, the Palestinian Authority ambition is for one state, not for two. There are many mechanical aspects of this, defense aspects of this, which just simply wouldn't work. When they talk about retreat to the 67 borders, those weren't borders. Those were ceasefire or armistice lines, not true borders. They're not defensible. And then you've got, close to 900,000 Jews who live in the area known as Judea and Samaria. What are you going to do with those? You got 2 million Arabs in Israel proper. You can have a switch? I don't think so. So logistically, a two-state solution would never, ever work.
Nope.
But a one-state where people live together peacefully side by side, like the 2 million Arabs that live in Israel today and are total part of the society. We have, Arab judges, and we have Arabs in the Knesset, and we have Arab professors and Arab doctors, and they're in every strata of society. And it's not an apartheid state like the detractors say, not at all. So that could work. We already have precedent for it.
And Gabrielle, we appreciate your commentary, and NTD News is going to be watching the developments of this peace deal very closely. And it's unclear exactly what's going to happen, and maybe Egypt was a little bit unsure as to whether or not they would go with maybe President Trump's earlier proposal of depopulating Gaza Strip and so on. But thank you for providing us with this great insight into this situation that we're faced with. Gabrielle,
my honor, my pleasure. Many blessings to you and your viewers.
Thank you. And New York and New Jersey are under a state of emergency as a powerful nor'easter hits the region. How the storm could impact the region today, coming up for you in a minute.